The Wilkinson family became ghost quite suddenly during the Second World War when a bomb fell on their house. The house was called Rest Haven, after the hotel where Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson had spent their honeymoon, and you couldn't have found a nicer place to live. It had bow windows and blue and stained glass in the bathroom and garden with a bird table and lily pond. Mrs. Wilkinson kept everything spotless. Her husband, Mr. Wilkinson, was a dentist who went to town every day to fill people's teeth. And they had a son called Eric, who was 13 when the bomb fell. He was a boy scout and had just started having spots and falling in love with the girls who sneered at him. Also living in the house were Mr. Wilkinson's mother, who was a fierce old lady with a dangerous umbrella, and Mrs. Wilkinson's sister Trixie, mother, okay, who was a fierce old lady with a dangerous umbrella, and Mrs. Wilkinson's sister Trixie, a pale, fluttering to whom bad things were always happening. The family had been getting ready to go to the air raid shelter at the bottom of the garden, and they were collecting the things they needed. Grandma took her umbrella and her gas mask case, which did not hold her gas mask but a bottle labeled poison. The family had been getting ready to go to their air shelter at the bottom of the garden. They were collecting the things they needed. Grandma took her umbrella and her gas mask case, which did not hold her gas mask but a bottle labeled poison. Hold her gas mask. She meant to drink it if there was an invasion rather than fall into enemy hands. Mrs. Wilkinson gathered up her knitting and unhooked the bridge bird cage that held their pet bird. Come in and in her. Okay. Mrs. knitting and unhooked the bird cage that held their pet bird, a budgie. And Eric took a book called Scouting for Boys and the letter he was writing to a girl, Cynthia Harbottle. In the hall they met Mr. Wilkinson, who had just come in and was changing into his khaki uniform. He belonged to the Home Guard, a brave band of part-time soldiers who practiced crawling through the undergrowth and shooting things when they had finished work. Hurry up everyone, he said, the planes are getting closer. But just then they remembered that poor Trixie was still in her upstairs bedroom wrapped in a flag. The flag was her costume for a show the Women's Institute was putting on for the gallant soldiers. And Trixie has been chosen to be the spirit of Britain and to come on in the flag, the Union Jack. I'll just go and fetch her, said Mrs. Wilkinson, who knew that Trixie had not been at all with the way she looked and might be too shy to come down and join them. She began to climb the stairs, and then the bomb fell, and that was that. I'll go fetch her, said Mrs. Wilkinson. Of course, it was a shock realizing that they had suddenly become ghosts. Fancy me a spook, said Grandma, shaking her head. Still, they were a bit pale and shimmery, of course, but not looking so different from the way they had before. Grandma always wore her best hat to the shelter, the one with the bunch of cherries trimmed with lovers' knots, and the whiskers on her chin stuck out like daggers in the moonlight. Eric was in his scout uniform with the scarf and the badge to show that he was a pathfinder, and his spectacles were still on his nose. Only the budgie didn't look too good. He had lost his tail feathers and seemed to have become rather a small bird. Oh, Henry, what shall we do now? Asked Mrs. Wilkinson. The top half of her husband was just like a soldier in a tin hat that he had covered with leaves so as to make himself look like a bush. But the bottom half was dressed like a dentist. Mrs. Wilkinson, who loved him very much, glided close to him and looked up into his face. We shall do what we did before, Maud, said Mr. Wilkinson. Live decent lives, live decent lives. Acha, live decent lives and serve our country. At least we are all together, said Grandma. But then a terrible silence fell, and as the spectres looked at each other, their ectoplasm turned as white as snow. Where is Trixie? Mrs. Wilkinson faltered. Where is my dear sister? Where indeed? They searched what was left on the house. They searched the garden. They called and called, but there was no sign of shy spook with spectacles dressed in nothing but a flag. For poor Maud Wilkinson, this was an awful blow. She cried, she moaned, she wrung her hands. I promised mother I would look after her, she wailed. I have always looked after Trixie. This was true. Maud and Trixie's mother had run a stage dancing school, and ever since they were little Maud and helped her nervous sister be a sugar puff or a baby swan on a dandelion. But there was nothing to be done. Why some people become ghosts and others don't is a mystery that no one has ever solved. The next years passed uneventfully. The war ended, but nobody came to rebuild their house, and the Wilkinson lived in it much as they had done before. It was completely ruined, but they could remember where all the rooms were. And in a way, being a ghost is simple. You don't feel the cold or have to go to school, and they soon got the hang of passing through walls and vanishing. Having Mr. Wilkinson to explain things to them was a great help, of course. You have to remember, he said, that while people are made of muscles and skin and bones, ghosts are made of ectoplasm. But that does not mean, he went on sternly, that we can allow ourselves to become feeble and woozy and faint. Ectoplasm can be strengthened just the way that muscles can. But however busy they were doing knee bends and press ups and learning to move things by the power of their will, they never forgot poor Trixie. Every single evening, as the sun went down, they went into the garden and called her. They called her from the north, they called her south and east and the west, but the sad goose pimpled spook never appeared. Then, when they had been phantoms for about 15 years, something unexpected happened. They found the ghost of a lost child. They were out for an early morning ride in the fields near their house when they saw a white shape lying in the grass under the shelter of a hedge. Goodness, do you think it's a passed on sheep? Asked Mrs. Wilson. But when they got closer, they saw that it was not the ghost of a sheep that lay there, it was a ghost of a little girl. She wore an old fashioned night dress with a ribbon round the neck and one embroidered slipper, and though she was fast asleep, the string of a rubber sponge bag was clasped in her hand. She must be a ghost from olden times, said Mrs. Wilkinson excitedly. Look at the stitching on the night dress. You don't get sewing like that nowadays. She looks wet, said Grandma. This was true. Drops of water glistened in her long, tousled hair, and her one bare foot looked damp. Perhaps she drowned, suggested Eric. Mrs. Wilkinson opened the sponge bag. Inside it were the expected toiletries, a toothbrush, a tin of tooth powder, okay, with a picture of Queen Victoria on the lid and a fish. It was wild fish, not the kind of that lives in tanks, but it too was a ghost and could tell them nothing. It must have floated into the sponge bag when she was in the water, said Mr. Wilkinson. But the thing to do now was to wake the child, and this was difficult. She didn't seem to be just asleep, she seemed to be in coma. In the end, it was the budgie who did it by saying open wide in his high, quacking voice. He had learned to say this when his cage hung in the dentist's office because it was what Mr. Wilkinson said to his patients when they sat down in the dentist's chair. Oh, the sweet thing, cried Mrs. Wilkinson as the chair stirred and stretched. Isn't she a darling? I am sure she lost. And if she is lost. And if she is, she must come and make her home with us. Must not she? Henry, we must adopt her. Henry, we must adopt her. She bent over the child. What's your name, dear? Can you remember what you are called? The girl's eyes were open now, but she still was still not properly awake. Adopt her, she repeated, and then in a stronger voice, adopta, adopta, repeated Mrs. Wilson. That's an odd name, but very pretty. So that was what she came to be called. Though they often called her Addie for short, she never remembered anything about her past life. And Mr. Wilson, who knew things, said he had a concussion, which is a blow on the head that makes you forget your past. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson never pretended to be her parents. She was told to call them Uncle Henry and Aunt Maud. Okay, but she had not been with them for more than a few weeks before they felt that she was the daughter they had always longed for, and the greatest comfort in that now began because life now became very difficult. Their house was rebuilt, and the people who moved in were the kind who couldn't see ghosts. They thought nothing of putting a plate of scrambled eggs down on Grandma's head, on running the Hoover over the carpet, and through Eric when he wanted to be quiet and think about why Cynthia Harbour didn't love. And when they left, another set of people moved in who could see ghosts, and that was even worse. Every time any of the Wilson appeared, they shrieked and screamed and fainted, which was terribly hurtful. I could understand if we were headless, said Aunt Maud. I would expect to be screamed as it I was headless or blood-stained, agreed Grandma. But we have always kept ourselves decent and the children too. Then the new people stopped screaming and started talking about getting the ghost exorcised, or after that there was nothing for it. They left their beloved rest heaven and went away to find another home. The Wilson went to London thinking there would be a lot of empty houses there, but this was a mistake. No place had been more bombed in the war, and it was absolutely packed with ghosts. And ghosts in schools, ghosts whooping about in bus stations, ghosts in factories and offices, playing about with computers, and older ghosts too from a bygone age, knights in armor wandering around Indian takeaways, wailing nuns in toy shops, and all of them looking completely flaked out and muddled. In the end, the Wilsons found a shopping arcade that didn't seem too crowded. It had all sorts of shops in it, shoe shops and grocery shops and sweet shops and bunion shops. Bunion. अच्छा बनियन से आया है. बनियन दिखेगी. बनियन. बनियन shop. Puzzled adopter. Bunyan shops. The Bunyan shop, which puzzled Adopta. Can you buy bunions, Aunt Maud? She asked, looking at the big wooden foot in the window with a leather bunion nailed to one toe. No, dear. Bunions are nasty bumps that people get on the side of their toes, but you can buy things to make bunions better, medicated pads and ointments. But the bunion shop, which was really a hospital supply shop, was already haunted by a frail ghost called Mr. Hoffman, a German professor who had made himself quite ill by looking at the bowls for spitting into and the rubber tubes and the wall charts showing what could go wrong with people's livers, which was plenty, so they went to live in a knicker shop. Adopta called it the knicker shop, but of course, no one can make a living just by selling underpants. It sold pajamas, swimsuits, night dresses, and undershirts. But none of them were at all like the pajamas and swimsuits and undershirts the Wilsons were used to. In my days, knickers were long and decent with elastic at the knee and pockets to keep your hanky in, grumbled Grandma. And those I was 25 before I saw my first tummy button. And look at those hussies in the fitting rooms. Shameless, I call it. It's the children I'm bothered about, said Aunt Maud. They shouldn't be seeing such things. And really, some of the clothes sold in that shop were not nice. Garter belts that were just a row of frills and see-through slips and transparent boxes full of briefs. Brief what? Snorted Grandma. Still, they really tried to settle down and make a life for themselves. Adapta was put to sleep in the office where she wouldn't be among ruffled pants and tights with rude names. And Uncle Henry stayed among the socks because there is a limit to how silly you can get with socks. They hung the budgie's cage on the rack beside the wonder brass and told themselves that they had lucky to be roof over their heads at all, but they were not happy. The shopping arcade was stuffy and the people wandering up and down it looked greedy and bored. They missed the garden at Rest Heaven and the green fields, and although they went out and called Trixie every night, they couldn't help wondering whether a shy person dressed in a flag would dare to appear in such crowded place even if she heard them. Aunt Maud did everything she could to make the knicker shop into a proper home for ghosts. She arranged cobwebs on the ceiling and brought in dead thistles from the graveyard and rubbed mold into the walls. But the lady who sold the knickers was a demon with a floor polisher. She was another one who couldn't see ghosts, and though they slept all day and tried to keep out of her way, she was forever barging through them or spinning the poor budgie round as she twiddled the wonder bras on their stand. Grandma was getting bothered about Mr. Hoffyman in the bunion shop. He kept coming up with more and more diseases, and Eric had started counting his spots again and writing awful poetry to Cynthia Harry Bottle. But Eric, we have been ghosts for years and years, his mother would cry. Cynthia would be a fat old lady by now. Oh, but Eric, we have been ghosts for years and years, and mother would cry. Cynthia be a fat old lady by now, but his only hurt. Eric, who said that to him, she would always be young, and he would glide off to the greeting card shop to see if he could Find anything to rhyme with Cynthia or her bottle or both. Oh, Henry, do you think we shall ever have a proper home again? Poor Maud would cry, and her husband would pat her back and tell her to patient and never let on that when he was pretending to go to the dental hospital to study new ways of filling teeth. He was really house hunting and had found nothing at all. But Aunt Maud's worst worry was about adopter. Addie was becoming a street ghost. She often stayed out all night and she was picking up bad habits and mixing with completely the wrong sort of ghosts. Ghosts who had been having a bath when their house caught fire and had been to put on any clothes. The ghost of rat catchers and vulgar people who swore and drank in club pubs. And she was bringing in the most unsuitable pets. Eddie had always been crazy about animals. She liked living animals, but of course, for a ghost to drag living animals about is silly, and the ones that had her hurt were the creatures that has passed on and become ghosts and didn't quite understand what had happened to them, but it was one thing to fill the garden at Rest Haven with hedgehogs and rabbits and moles, and quite another to keep a run over a lie cat or battered pigeon among the satin pajamas and the leotards. Please, dear, no more strays, begged Aunt Maud. After all, you have the budgie and your dear fish. But though she wouldn't have hurt Aunt Maud for the world, Addie couldn't help feeling that a bird who said nothing but open wide and my name is Billy wasn't very interesting. Nor was her fish much fun. He stayed in the sponge bag and did absolutely nothing. And though Adopta didn't blame him, she longed for an exciting pet, something unusual. So she began to haunt London Zoo, and it was on the way back from the one winter's night that she saw something that was to change all their lives. She had had her eye on a duck-billed platypus that had not looked at well the day before. Its brown fur looked limp and dull. Its eyes were filming over, and its big flat beak seemed to be covered in some kind of mold. Of course, she knew that even if it died, the duck bill would not necessarily become a ghost. Animals are the same as people. Some people become ghosts and some don't. Even so, as she glided toward the cage, Adopta was full of hope. She imagined taking it to bed with her, holding it in her arms. No one had such an unusual pet. And though Aunt Maud would make a fuss at the beginning, she was far too kind to turn it into the street. But a great disappointment awaited her. The city keeper must have given the duckbill some medicine because it looked much better. In fact, much better. In fact, uh, it looked fine. It was lumbering round the cage like a 2 year old eating a worm. Perhaps it was because she was so sad about her lost pet that she took a wrong turning on the way home to the knicker shop. The street she was gliding down was not the one she went down usually. She was just about to turn back when she saw a sign above a tall grey house. It was picked out in a blue electric light bulbs, and what it said was Eddie adopt a ghost. Eddie bragged hard and stared at it. She was utterly amazed. But that is extraordinarily, she said. That is my name. I'm called Adopta and I'm a ghost. She floated up to the roof and stared at the letters. Is it my house? She wondered. Is it a house for me? But that did not seem very likely. Could there be two Adopta ghosts in the world? Was this the home of very grand spook? with green skin and hollow eyes, a queenly spook with trailing dresses ordering everyone about. But when she peered through the windows, she saw. Oh, adapta. But when she peered through the window, she saw that the rooms looked rather dull. Offices with files and desks and telephones, a queenly spook with green ectoplasm would never live in a place like that. Very much excited, Eddie hurried home. Aunt Maud, you must come at once, she said. I have seen a most amazing thing. Eddie, it's your bedtime. It's nearly 8 in the morning. They will be opening the sh- shop in half an hour. In half an hour. Didi, please beg the doctor. I just know this is important. So Maud came and landed on the ledge beneath the notice, and when she had done so, she was quite as excited as the child had been. My dear, it does not say adopt a ghost. Look carefully, and you will see a space between the middle letters and say adopt a ghost. And I really believe it's an agency to find homes for people like us. Look, there's a notice. Ghost wanting to be rehoused should register between midnight and 3 a.m. on Tuesdays, Thursdays, or Saturdays. She turned to the child and hugged her. Oh, Eddie, I do believe our troubles are over. There is someone who cares about us, someone who really and truly cares. And Maud was right. There was someone who cared about ghosts and who cared about them much, very much. The people, to be exact, two people to be exact. Miss Pringle, who was small and twittery, with round blue eyes, and Mrs. Mannering, who was big and bossy and wore jackets with huge shoulder pads and had a booming voice. The two ladies had met an evening class for witches. They were interested in unusual ways of living and thought they might have special powers, which would have been nice. But they had not enjoyed the class at all. They were held in a basement near Paddington Station, and the other people there had wanted to things that Miss Pringle and Mrs. Mannering could not possibly approve of. Things like dancing counterclockwise dressed in nothing but their underclothes and sticking pins into puppets, and that had taken some poor person a long time to make. याद तेरी आई